Hello, everybody, and welcome to LRM Ranks It, the show where we here at LRM rank your favorite movies, television shows, games, and we're going to actually get into ranking some elements from those things, like best costumes from superhero movies and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun, and I'm joined today by the great Editor-In-Chief of LRM Online himself, Joseph Jammer Medina.
Hey, Kyle, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts. This is a franchise I adore on many fronts, to varying degrees depending on the movie, which you'll find out on the list. So I had a good time putting together the list. Actually, on the site a couple of years ago, right before the first one came out, I put together a list as well, and it was interesting to see how the other ones fall into place around those ratings.
Hi, so your list changed up a bit since you ranked it last time?
Not really, actually. Other than figuring out where Fantastic Beasts went, Fantastic Beasts 1 and 2, not really. Mm-hmm. So, spoiler alert?
If you guys can remember back when Jammer did his rankings all by his lonesome. Well, as you said, we're going to be ranking, I think they're calling it the Wizarding World, right? That's their whole universe.
Yep, and, Wizarding World.
Yep, we're going to be ranking that, which is weird because the theme park in Orlando is Wizarding World of Harry Potter, I think, or something like that. So, whatever, Wizarding World, it includes the original 8 Harry Potter films and the 2 Fantastic Beast films. Me and you both saw Fantastic Beasts the Friday of release. This is coming out the Tuesday following that. And so I will say this. All of our ranks are filled with spoilers. We don't do spoiler-free ranks. So if you have not seen Fantastic Beasts 2, I would not watch this video until you've seen it. We do introduce each movie before we talk about it. So if you want to roll the dice and risk maybe hearing something out of place, go ahead. But we appreciate everybody joining us today. And just in general, Joseph, give me a little bit of your history with the franchise in general. Like, how'd you get into Harry Potter? Are you a super fan? That type of thing.
Well, like many people in my age range, I read it in middle school, right around the time it was becoming popular. I think that was like 98 or 99, something around there. Maybe around there. Maybe even 2000. No, not 2000. Definitely 99 or so. And fell in love with the books. I thought they were great. It was funny because they got popular before I had heard about them. And then I was like, how have I not heard about this? Because I was a huge fucking nerd in middle school. I read a lot of books, and I had not heard about Harry Potter. I think that was before I realized that, well, not before I realized, I wasn't stupid, but before I really thought about books coming out that were new. You know, it wasn't like I was a kid going like, oh, this new book series is coming out. It was more just like I go to the bookstore and I find a book and then I move on with my life. I didn't think about the release schedule. And they're like, oh, this is a new book series that came out, Harry Potter. And they really like it and stuff. So I read the first one. It was late enough to the game to where the first one was in paperback. And read that one, loved it. And I pretty much in my head have mental locations of where I was reading all of the books. That's how much of an impact they all made on me. I know for the first one, I was like at some county fair because I was a huge loser. I took my book everywhere. Anything, just I didn't want to socialize, didn't want to like do anything fun, just wanted to read my book, be a total homebody. That was me, and I loved all of these books. They were so much fun. I think I fell out later on in the series. Not that I didn't like them. It's just that I bought them all on day one, but it took me longer to read because I didn't prioritize them as much, you know, especially the last 2. I know the last, second to last book, not the Deathly Hallows, the Half-Blood Prince, I read, got halfway through, and then stopped, and then didn't read it for like another year or year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is an interesting story we'll talk to once we get to it in the ranking. But yeah, I love these movies. I love this world. I've read the first 3 a couple times. I've only read the last 4 once a piece, but my wife and I, we talk about it all the time. She loves them. She's read them 1 billion times, and I've watched YouTube videos on them. I just love the mythology surrounding them. I think it's a lot of fun, and I really love author J.K. Rowling, and still follow her today, all of her stuff she does with her Cormoran Strike series, the mystery series about like a detective. And that's a really good series. If you haven't read it, it's fantastic. I just read the 4th one, Lethal White, so good. And it's interesting because I feel like that feels more like the most recent Fantastic Beasts movie, which we'll get into later. But yeah, that's kind of my history with the franchise. Really love the author, really love it. I wouldn't say I'm a super fan, though. I'd say I'm just short of that. I'm above average, but not a super fan.
Okay. Myself, my sister got into it around the time they were coming out. Maybe a little bit later because I think she was in middle school herself. She's a few years in it. She's your age. And so she got into it, and I actually thought it was kind of goofy. The first time I actually heard about it was when the first movie came out, so a little bit, after the books had started coming out. And I thought it was like weird how they were leaning hard into cliches with pointed hats and magic wands, and I was like, oh, that's lame. I don't care about it. And I never read anything, never watched a single movie. Correction, I was working at a movie theater when Chamber of Secrets came out. And so part of, working at a movie theater, I don't know if you ever did, you sometimes the people working the concession stand, especially at smaller theaters, go to make sure that nobody's recording a movie illegally, make sure there's no stupid stuff going on in a screening room. So you walk through all the screening rooms. Every now and then you take your break, you sit down and watch part of it. So I'd seen part of Chamber of Secrets. I don't know if that's the best movie to start off with, but maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit later. But when I was returning to the United States from Europe after a trip over there, the in-seat entertainment, like the screens on the back of the seats in front of you, had 5 of them. Five of them. It had the first 3 and then number 6. And the first 3 and then number 5. And so I watched it just because there was nothing else on the flight to really keep me entertained. And I don't know if anybody's ever flown across the Atlantic Ocean, but it takes forever. And I managed to watch all 3 of the first Harry Potter films and was hooked. Like, I watched the first one, I was like, okay, yeah, that was all right. Let me see this chamber. Say, yeah, okay, yeah, I can see why kids like that. Yeah, and then the third one, I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is actually really fun and entertaining. And when my wife and I got to Atlanta, when we got to our hotel, I got a hold of the next 2, and then when we finally got to our destination where we were moving to, I finished up the series. I have read parts of the books. We actually own all of them. We've got the 2 illustrated ones, Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets. We have illustrated. Have you seen those, the hardcover illustrated ones?
Yeah, we have the first 3.
Okay, cool. So we got the first 2, need to get the third one probably this Christmas. And so I've been with those with my son, and it's a great series. It's entertaining. It's very, very, I can see where it could appeal to younger audiences even more. Like, my proclivity for geekiness means I could have been probably a bigger fan, much like yourself, if I'd gotten into it a little bit earlier. But it's great.
You're probably at the age when you were too cool for them. You're at that age where it's like, I'm not going to deal with that kids stuff.
I wouldn't necessarily say that, because I was still, reading comic books and into Star Wars and video games and Final Fantasy. Lord of the Rings, I saw all of those in theaters. But I do really enjoy them. I'm one of those people, I kind of get OCD with it. I can't start in the middle. I can't just watch Goblet of Fire or Half-Blood Prince. If I'm going to watch Harry Potter, I got to go ahead and set some time aside for a week, sit down and start from 1 through 8, watch them all. So
yeah,
that's
I'm
how
the exact
I am
opposite. I could watch them in whatever order I want, however order I want. It's beautiful not being that type of person. It saves me so much time.
My wife is the same way, and yeah, they do. They take forever.
Yeah.
But they're fun. They're absolutely fun. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our list. And as always, I'll let my guests start. So, Jammer, what is your number 10? And let me back that up real quick. The way I approached this list was similar to the way we did Star Wars, which is rewatchability. Even though I generally have to watch them all in a row, the ones that I enjoyed watching most. Not necessarily best story or best acting, but just most enjoyable for me. What was that similar to how you approached it?
I mean, I approached it to how much I enjoy them, not necessarily rewatchability.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, so it's based personally on my personal thoughts. I'm not looking at what I think objectively is great filmmaking, even though they might line up, like the things I find great or may line up with what filmmaking is, but it's a personal thing for sure. It's not like this is the end-all be-all list by any stretch of the imagination. And I know some choices I have here will be knocked by people.
Yeah, I think I've probably got a few that will be too. And I think I got a few that might be stereotypically placed, but that's all right. It's the way I feel about it. Either way, Joseph, go ahead and give us number 10.
So at number 10, we have what I feel is the only bad movie in the franchise, in my book. And that is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. So that is my favorite book in the franchise and the longest book in the series, but it is the shortest film and I think the most shittily adapted. It was the only one not adapted by Steve Kloves, who adapted all other 7 movies, and it is rickety. It is streamlined. I understand the need. They wanted to go streamlined, but they went too streamlined. And there's like a lot of stuff that just got lopped off to the point where a lot of it doesn't make any sense. You got some really awkward romance stuff that I don't think was handled incredibly well. I mean, but I think that holds for the most of the series in general. But it really kind of starts... I think it was handled better in the 4th one, and in this one, it was just really awkward. There's a lot of weird, awkward humor. I feel like the CG in this one... I feel like for the 4th one, they used a good mix of practical effects and CG, and in Order of the Phoenix, it seemed mostly CG, and it seemed kind of spongy and weird in the way the visual effects looked just really awkward to me. So it was kind of this weird transitional film. It was also the first film that David Yates directed, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it was him just getting his sea legs and figuring out where to go from there. I just don't think it was very good. The story wasn't handled well. The visuals weren't handled well. All the awkward stuff. It wasn't great. And I think it also doesn't help that I really loved that 5th book and thought it was underserved by the shortest runtime in the franchise at the time. I think the shortest would end up being Deathly Hallows Part 2, but the shortest at the time.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard that exact same thing again. I get to approach these completely ignorant of what's in the books as far as having read them firsthand, but like you, I really enjoy the mythology of the Wizarding World. So I've read online. I know a lot of the context that's missed in the movies, that's in the books and things like that. And you're not the first person I've heard that loves Order of the Phoenix in print, but can't stand it as a movie. My sister, I was talking about earlier, the one that had actually, read all the books, who was into it from the beginning. She says the exact same thing. Like, she loves the book, can't stand the movie, is always angry about how much they cut out of that film. Yeah. It's pretty low on my list too. And so we'll get to talk about it here in a little bit. So we'll go ahead and continue on with my number 10. And that is going to be Deathly Hallows Part 1. And
yes, my heart.
Yep.
My heart.
Yeah,
okay.
I had a feeling when me and you were talking offline about, making this list, that it would probably be higher up on yours. And like I said, I approached this pretty much from how much I enjoy the movies. And like I said, relatively speaking to me, rewatchability. Like, do I want to sit down and watch this movie? It is not necessarily a horrible movie. It's not horribly made. It's very slow. And it's very dry, but it's also very, very dark. And it's one of those movies that after I watch it, I kind of need a palate cleanser, something ridiculously fun, ridiculously funny. Because if I go to bed after watching that movie, it's dark. It's very, very, and it's not even dark like Empire Strikes Back. Empire Strikes Back, Luke loses a hand, finds out Vader's his father, and it ends in a dark note. But Deathly Hallows Part 1 is just bleak.
It starts bleak, it ends bleak, it continues bleak. There's no tonal shift for the positive until maybe the very end of it. Yeah, I understand completely. And when you go dark like that, it's sometimes hard to get rewatchability out of something like that. And you need a palate cleanser.
Absolutely. And so that is, like I said, I will say there are a couple of these movies that I think are bad. But I don't think there's any of them that are, in my mind, absolutely horrible. But this one is not low because it's bad. It's low just because I don't like watching it as much. It's in this fantastical world filled with magic. This is one of those ones that just, for me, it drags on. I don't like the pacing, and I know it needed to be that. This is not one of those films where you could interject a bunch of lighthearted moments. It's got to be what it is, but it's one of my least favorite to watch. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And it's funny because, like, you know, the first book or the first movie, it's like really bright and happy logo, and then by the end, it's like falling apart and like really dark and shit. And
but I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. I think that's kind of a cool way to do the logo. Like it ages with the school and the students. So, I'm guessing it's much higher on your list by the fact that you said I just stabbed you in the heart. So let's go ahead and continue on.
Higher.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, cool.
My number 9 is
your number 9.
Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Okay.
I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's another worthy adaptation, but it definitely continues the trend set by the first one to where it's not as much an adaptation as it is a ride through all of the scenes that were in the movies or in the books. It literally is almost beat for beat everything. They changed some stuff, but not a lot of direct quotations, which is great for fans, great for me as a kid watching it. But there's 2 downsides to it. One, it's not necessarily the best it could be for the film medium because they're very different mediums, film and books. Second, it's really fucking long. It's like 2 hours and 35 minutes, and it does not need to be that long at all. And so that's the main thing. It's long. Like, I know for the first couple movies, it's really hard for me to watch them all through because it feels like I just want to stop halfway through and be like, okay, I've had my fill. And then maybe 2 months later, I'll pick up from the middle and then continue on and finish it because they're just so long and they kind of drag for me. I enjoyed them when I watched them, but as you mentioned, as far as rewatchability goes, it's just wasn't a fan. But great direction. I really enjoyed what they brought to it. I love the fact that Chris Columbus, the director, was able to bring this into the real world in a believable way, in a magical way, in a fittingly, I don't want to say childish, but child-friendly manner that also was able to go relatively dark enough to keep, adults and parents engaged.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Like I said, it was the first one I had actually seen any of on film because I was working at the theater when it came out. And it was an all right movie overall, but I definitely feel story-wise and as story in the movie, like you said, it just kind of going through the motions. It's like, hey, look at this. All right, now look at this. Now look at this. And that does make it also kind of drag on. Yeah. You're like, well, you hurry up and get down to the damn chamber and fight the snake. Come on now.
Yeah.
Hurry up. But I will say there's a drastic difference in the cast and their capabilities between that first movie and the second one. And by the time you get to the third one, absolutely. I mean, their full speed sprinting have really developed as actors and actresses. And I think that's one of the cool things to watch this series as a whole is as you watch the movies themselves, not only are the characters developing, but you can see the actors and actresses themselves developing and getting better. And I think even though they switch, go ahead.
Well, it's funny. I feel like that's right for the most part, but I think one actor that had almost the inverse happen was what's her name, Emma Watson, where she was really, I think, good in the first 2, but then after that, I feel like she either got self-conscious about it and started acting really weird, or the director gave fewer like line readings because she was no longer a child, and therefore she had to figure stuff out on her own, and things were maybe rougher as a result, but.
Could be.
Yeah, just my thought. Anyways, continue.
No, I was just going to say that it's... I completely forgot what I was going to say. Way to go. Way to interrupt the host. Way to go, Jammer. No, I'm joking.
My bad.
No, it's one of those movies. It's higher on my list simply because there's other movies that I enjoyed less. But I do like some of the action sequences are fun. And, I mean... big fight with a big sewer snake. I mean, that's pretty cool to me. So. Basilisk. So that covers that one for now. We'll go ahead and continue on to my number 9, which was your number 10, The Order of the Phoenix. My least favorite part of this movie is the teacher. I can't stand her. Umbridge. I can't stand the actress. I can't stand the character. And I get what she's doing and why she's doing it, but it grates on me to no end. And so, other than
isn't that the point?
The fact
isn't that the point?
Yes, it is. And don't get me wrong. Okay, for example, I hate. Let me rephrase that. I am not a fan of the actress Helena Bonham Carter. I'm not. Okay. There's a lot of movies she's done that I absolutely cannot stand her because of her character, and it's like I don't know how to explain it. It's just one of those things in my mind where, like, my favorite film with her is one where she's in it very little, and it's The King's Speech with Colin Firth and Jeffrey Rush. Great movie. Amazing movie. She does fine in that because it's like one of the only movies where she's not Helena Bonham Carter. It's just one of those things. I know why the character's doing what she's doing. That's important for the story, but it grates on me so much that it makes the movie unenjoyable for me. I don't know how else to explain it.
You know Umbridge isn't played by Helena Bonham Carter,
I
right?
know that.
Okay.
I was giving an example.
Sure.
Like, I'm the
Okay.
same way with Helena Bonham Carter. Like, whenever she's on the screen as Lestrange, can't stand it.
Okay.
I like Fight Club, but I really like every time, God, what's her name? Not Carla, Marla, is on screen in Fight Club. I can't, because I don't like Helena Bonham Carter. I don't.
Okay.
And there's no like logic for it. It's just one of those things where certain movies I've seen, it rubbed me the wrong way. This movie rubs me the wrong way. I don't ever want to watch it. The last fight scene is really cool. Don't get me wrong. That's a lot of fun. And I'm fairly certain if they had been more faithful to the movie or to the books, that this, again, might be more enjoyable. Or if I had seen it at a younger age, like gotten involved into it at a younger age. But it is definitely, I mean, I would almost say Deathly Hallows and Phoenix are tied for me on I don't really ever want to watch again.
Right.
So, any last words on Order of Phoenix?
Order of the Phoenix. I think Umbridge was handled pretty well, but I think her reign of terror, they had to go through it in montage form as opposed to actually let certain things act out. And I think that really worked against it and made it feel bigger. And by bigger, I mean like, more cartoonish than it needed to be. Granted, Umbridge as a character, her name's fucking Umbridge, so it's cartoonish to some level. But I just think it was to the detriment of the film to have it whisk by all that stuff so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that covers my number 9, so let's go ahead and go into your number 8.
So my number 8 on my list is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Honestly, pretty much everything I said about Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets holds true for this one. It was a great introduction to the world. I really loved how that was handled. I liked how they handled a lot of the effects, which were mostly practical at the time, and really just it felt pulled right out of the imagination, or at least out of my imagination, almost every aspect of it, which was fantastic. But too long. It was just too long, too faithful to the source material, and it's a drag to watch nowadays, even though it's a lot of fun to watch, especially around Christmas time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I can.
That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Okay. I can agree with most of your points there. It's definitely a little bit higher on my list, not by much, but a little bit higher. It is a great introduction, and I could see where, again, if I was younger, how much more enamored with it I might be. My sister, again, she did tell me that it's one of the few that is really close to the book. Like they did a really good job taking everything important from the book and putting it onto film. And other than the horrible acting by some of the cast, which is, this was most people's first movie, and it's not just, a movie. It's this huge worldwide franchise that's beloved, and now you got to bring these characters to life. There's some fun with it. I like the stuff with the Dursleys. They're at the little lighthouse, whatever thing they're staying at when Hagrid comes to deliver the cake and the card because they've been ignoring it, ignoring all the other ones. That's a cool, funny scene with when all the owls are delivering like thousands of these letters are coming into the Dursley house. I don't really. It's a first-time outing, and it definitely shows. It does not age well. Out of all of these films, that first one definitely feels like it is exactly what it is, the first one, if that makes sense. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I know the CG effects do not age well, like the CG effects. Actually, when I was little, the CG effects on the broom with Neville in that one scene with the Remembrall, that does not age. That looked bad when it came out in 2001. I remember thinking that looked horrible. Them switching from the CG kid to the normal kid. And the Neville was fat, and the CG kid wasn't fat. So the switch between them was even more crazy. And then the scene with the troll it looked really blah, not great. So whenever they did mostly practical, but whenever they did CG, it was very clear.
Yes.
this is CG. And
Yes.
it was like straight out of like The Mummy Returns and just not great.
Scorpion
Luckily,
King
it wasn't
2.
most of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm wondering if, Warner Brothers was just kind of holding tight the purse strings to see how this first one would do. There's still some
take a
bad
look. I'm
CGI throughout, but it got better as the franchise
Yeah,
went
for
on.
sure. It did get better.
So, like I said, we'll get to it a little bit later on my list. So we'll go ahead and go to my number 8, which is Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. I found this movie to be incredibly slow. I kept looking at my watch. I had to go somewhere shortly after the movie was supposed to finish. I kept looking at my phone, wondering, okay, is it, how close are we to being done? How close are we to being done? And it wasn't that it wasn't unenjoyable. It's just I really think you could have cut about 10, 15 minutes out of it, made it a little bit more smooth, and I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more. It could have been up another space or two on my list by then. I like the mythology, but I really don't like that they're telling the story after Grindelwald and Dumbledore's fallout. Me and you and the others have had discussions on Slack. I really think that this series, the Fantastic Beasts series, should have been a Dumbledore and Grindelwald series. Like the first movie, them younger at school, they're meeting, becoming friends. The second movie, when you've got, Dumbledore being basically a racist jackass. And then the third movie, they're falling out in the big fight with Dumbledore, Aberforth, Grindelwald, and the sister when she gets killed. And I think that could have been such a more interesting story than this post-Fallout. And then we get snippets of what happened between them through flashbacks or somebody telling a story. So that's how I feel on that movie. It was so slow. It was some cool magic scenes. I really like the circus stuff that was going on, and the animals in this one, the beasts, are way more interesting than the first movie. But the pacing and some of the I don't know how else better to put it. The pacing really hurt the movie for me, and there was things that didn't really need to be there. There was people taking pauses and staying on camera silently for too long for me, and it didn't leave a great feeling for me. Hoping that the next one does better, because even though this isn't the story I necessarily wanted, I am interested in the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I
think
feel
I disagree with you on a couple of things. I disagree. The more I thought about it, I understand where you're coming from. Like, I want to see this story. But the thing with that one is we've heard a lot about that story. We already have it filled in our heads how that's going to play out in the books based on what we've heard in the books and stuff. And I feel like it would just be too much of the Solo effect or the Rogue One effect, where we're literally tackling something that we've heard about. Whereas this one, we don't really know much about it. Yeah. We don't really know much of how things will turn out and the stuff surrounding it. So we're not in our head filling in all the checklist of things that we want to see happen.
Right.
And she could be more flexible about the things that are thrown out there. So on that front, I think it works. And also, I can't imagine them having, 2 or 3 movies of a racist Dumbledore before he ends up being, a good guy. How can you side with someone like that in a movie that is, I wouldn't say aimed towards kids, because Fantastic Beasts was not aimed towards kids at all.
No, they're not. They're definitely for the fans that grew up with the books and movies, and it's for them today.
Right. But I think it would have been even more adult had they decided to go with racist Dumbledore as the lead, like anti-hero racist Dumbledore. I don't think it would have worked, but I understand where you're coming from as far as the pacing goes. I disagree, but I think that comes from my own perspective, which I'll get into later because it's higher up on my list than it is for you. So we'll leave it at that. Like, I get where you're coming from, even if I don't agree.
I'll counter the one thing about telling a story that we already know. I would wager that there is maybe almost equal parts fans of these series, maybe a little bit more on the book side, but there's still a lot of people that their only Harry Potter interaction has been with the movies, and the movies talk nothing, really. They talk nothing about Dumbledore and Grindelwald, their relationship and their falling out. Very little of it. You get some of it in Deathly Hallows about the death of the sister. I forget which item that they're going after, but they discuss Grindelwald a little bit. But that history, the real deep history between the two is not as prominent in the movies as it was the books. I had to go online to read all about that. And I think it was when the first Fantastic Beasts came out, my sister was like, yeah, this is who Grindelwald is. And I was like, oh yeah, it sounds familiar. Well, what's his history? I go look up his history. I'm just like, oh my God, why are we not getting this story? But I do agree that there are a lot of people that know the story. And I'm not saying that they could have never done the post stuff, but I really would have liked to have seen that relationship on screen. But you are right. It's kind of hard to have Dumbledore, everybody's, happy, loving old man from the original movies, to be a racist dick. And to have, because you'd have to have at least one full movie. Like the first movie would be transition,
Right.
Him and Grindelwald young, Grindelwald and him building their ideology. The second movie would be asshole. Well, Dumbledore's always kind of an asshole, but racist Dumbledore. And then you get into the third movie with his redemption, the big fight. But yeah, definitely. That's where it's at. It's mostly because of pacing, and I'd say I'm probably a little bit biased against the story versus what I wanted to see, but I'm not saying that this story is bad. I'm interested to see where they take it.
Fair enough.
So, let's go ahead and continue on with your number 7.
My number 7, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. This I thought was a fun return back to the Wizarding World, albeit relatively flawed. Mm-hmm. I still enjoy going back and watching it every now and then, but I think there is something missing, and I think that's something it has to do with Newt Scamander. Mm-hmm. He's a great lead, but he has no character arc. He's completely unchanging. There's not a lot of substance. You just get the feeling that they're setting the stage of what to come. It doesn't feel like there are gigantic stakes. You don't quite understand where everyone is coming from, so you're not really sure where it's going or how this is going to culminate. And by the end, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, so I guess that's how it goes. And I don't know. I was just a little bit underwhelmed with the overall substance of the story. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things where I saw it and I was like, okay, maybe once all 5 movies are out, I'll be able to look back and say, here's how this contributes to that overall thing. But until then, it's one of the better executed. I like what it did with tone. I like a lot of the visual effects, which are solid. I like the actors. I thought they were great. But overall, the story kind of underwhelmed me. And I felt it was because J.K. Rowling was making an overall story and almost not even bothering to make full arcs in each film. Character arcs. There was a full story, but I don't think there were full character arcs for anybody except for Jacob. Yeah. In that movie, and which is I think why he's one of the more engaging people in that movie, because he has that full arc. But it just felt a little underwhelming on the character front for me, and I thought that was disappointing. So that's why it's a little bit lower, even if it is enjoyable. And I don't think it'll be raising that much more for me as time goes on, based on how the second one panned out and everything, and the way they're being structured. Okay.
I totally get it. It's kind of funny. Me and you have the same movie at number 7. 7 for me is also Fantastic Beasts
perfect.
number 1, so we can talk about it a little bit more. And I agree. There's a point where they've got almost a complete movie, really focused on him, his animals, or his beasts. And then you get this other half movie dealing with Farrell's character, who's really Grindelwald in hiding, and Credence, and all of that stuff going on. But you mentioned Jacob, and Jacob to me is my favorite character out of both of these films. And he is a very engaging character. He's good, decent comic relief, but he's also an interesting character in my mind. And so even though
you never feel like he's a goofball or like just the comedic side character, like he has some substance.
Yes, absolutely. He is a very he's not your standard comic relief. I mean, he is the comic relief along with some of the interactions with the Beast, but he's more developed than that. And I really enjoyed when he's on screen, how he's interacting, and I think the guy's a pretty decent actor. As far as the sisters, man, I could see what was going to happen in Fantastic Beasts 2 early in that movie with Queenie, but I really like their interactions with the male counterparts. Queenie's strange and weird infatuation with the chubby American guy is funny. She's a funny character. Her mind reading ability is something that they could have played with more maybe they will in the future. We all know which side she picked. Came Fantastic Beasts 2. And just overall, yeah, I would agree. They tried to do two big stories in the same movie instead of like a primary story and then a subplot. And I think that kind of, to me, that kind of hurt with some of the way the movie ran. But overall, I seen it twice. I seen it the day before I went and saw Fantastic Beasts 2, because the other time that I had seen it was last year, or the year it came out, and I didn't watch all of it. My wife was watching it, and I really wasn't interested in it too much. And so I only saw like half of it, maybe 3/4. And I definitely enjoyed watching the whole thing more than I did watching only part of it.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of great standalone scenes. They're very intertwined with each other.
Yes. So.
And I think I got bored whenever Colin Farrell came on screen. Just his storyline is so dark and morbid and serious the entire time. And it's based a lot on sort of looks and reactions and visual stuff, not a lot of dialogue for the most part. And him talking to Credence, and Credence is just kind of looking down with his really ugly haircut and stuff. And it's just, there's a lot there. It just kind of dragged down the pacing for me. And
I will say this: you mentioned the effects that are great. I'll say there are one group of beasts whose effects suck, and that's those blue winged snake things. The ones with they have the silver eggs. Like, there's a scene where they're hatching when he's inside the suitcase, and it looks like a snake.
Oh, okay.
But I think it's got feathers and wings on it, and like small wings, and the big one was in the teapot, and it gets loose. Those, I don't know if it's because of the color or what, those stand out atrociously to me. Almost like Phase 1 Marvel or early Wizarding World movies is how bad it looks to me.
Hey man, when you have a movie full of a ton of beasts, some of them are going to get shafted, I guess.
So, let's go ahead and continue on with your number 6.
My number 6 is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. I enjoyed the pacing of this movie. I enjoyed how dark they allowed it to be. I think the cinematography has never been better. The performances for the main cast have never been more nuanced. And I really love that they mirrored the frustration of the characters in that book, in the first like 2/3 of the book, where they literally don't find any fucking any Horcruxes, and they're trying really hard, but they have no leads, and it kind of really puts you in their shoes with how frustrating it is when you're told that you're supposed to be figuring this out, and for some reason or another you just can't put the pieces together, and you have nothing to go off of, so you're kind of wandering aimlessly in search of anything.
Yeah.
And yes, I love the tone, I love the style, the cinematography was great, just the visuals in general, and just everything about it was so well done. I can understand where you're coming from with the pacing, how the pacing is kind of slow, but I respect it that they allowed it to be paced as it was. And for me, it allows me to sort of go back and look at the more nuanced aspects of the film and enjoy it for that. It just felt like a very mature, like a really, really mature version of the franchise that we hadn't seen before, and really highlighted that they're willing to go really dark.
And hearing what you've had to say about it, and thinking back to when I talked about it, I will say this: a lot of people thought splitting the book 7 up into 2 movies was just for a cash grab, but I really honestly think that, even though I don't care to watch it that often, Deathly Hallows being its own movie, I don't think you could build the same type of emotion for the finale if you had done both of these movies as a single 2.5-hour movie. I think you really, in order to build up the what's the word I'm looking for? Just I can't think of the word. Like, just not suspense, but the absolute horror that they are in.
Helplessness?
Helplessness. There's a great word for it. The helplessness, the dire situation that they're in. It was a good idea to have this as its own movie, even though it could have been a little bit shorter.
Yeah, I think the studio, I think it definitely was a cash grab for the studio to split them up, but I think director and screenwriter were managed to say, okay, well, let's take this idea and put it together in the most creatively satisfying way. And I guess they could afford to lose some runtime minutes, which is understandable. But as far as I think emotionally it worked. And it also emotionally helped to make Deathly Hallows Part 2 all the more impactful when it did, because it's just like straight up hit the ground running action movie.
Yes. It was real
Yeah.
done real well, and a lot of magic. You know, when I go back and I watch some of the early movies, it's like for a movie that's all about wizards and witches, there's very relatively little magic. I mean, I don't consider, you know, just because something floated, oh, now they're doing it. You know, I like that last movie in the grand battle because there's a shit ton of magic going on, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's your number 6. We already covered Deathly Hallows for me. Any last words on it?
I think it was a great way to set the tone for what would eventually be the final film in the franchise, or the Harry Potter franchise specifically, not the Wizarding World franchise.
Yeah. So my number 6 is going to be the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. First movie that they did, and it definitely feels like it, like I mentioned earlier when we were talking about it on your list. I think the reason why it gets a little bit higher is that OCD effect, and I have to watch it first. I don't know. It is a fun movie. It is long, and like it does feel dated, but it is a lot of fun to see these kids being introduced to this world. Harry's, you know, this is the first interaction with magic he's had at all. Ron comes from a family full of witches and wizards, and Hermione, her character as the egghead, is... Their interactions are great, even though they're not acting very well, even though their delivery is not the best by any means necessary. It's fun. And I do think they captured the amazement of somebody going to this school for the first time. And so I really enjoy that aspect of it. And I really appreciate kind of like... I don't want to say they set for the franchise, because of course the tone changes in between movies. It gets, you know, darker and darker as they get older. But I do appreciate the world that they started building in that first movie. You know, they did a good job of balancing telling that first story, but also building the world that we're going to be playing in for the next, you know, 6, 7, 8, 20 movies if Warner Brothers has their way. So I did put it a little bit higher on my list, and yeah, that's what I think about it. Any last words on...
I can't...
Go ahead.
I can't disagree with anything that you said. Like, everything you said is completely true. It set the stage and the table for everything to come, and it's entertaining to watch. I think I give the cast more credit than you because they're so little. Like, it doesn't bother me that they're not
garbage.
Amazing,
that's their job.
because they're kids. They're getting paid hundreds of thousands, I'm assuming hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this job. But yeah, it's funny because I almost give them more credit, and I placed it much lower. But yeah, it is fun to watch, and of course, if you're like you and you're like, oh god, I'm in the mood to watch Harry Potter, but I'm only in the mood to watch the 5th one. But I guess I have to watch the first all the way to the 5th in order to be fully satisfied. So I can understand why you'd have to convince yourself that movie was better than it really is.
Well, Jammer, that wraps up the first part of this video, 10 through 6. Any last words on your lower end of your films?
These aren't bad movies. Well, except for the last one. These are by no means bad. I don't think there's a Harry Potter movie that I hate by any stretch of the imagination. So keep that in mind. Just because they're lower doesn't mean I dislike them.
It's kind of like almost like ranking. It would be like ranking the original trilogy of Star Wars. That's you know, we ranked all the Star Wars movies, but in my mind there are some horrible ones. But that original trilogy, one of those movies is going to have to be number 3, and that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad movie. And Harry Potter, like I said, there are a couple of bad-ish films, but there's nothing horrible, nothing that I would be like, no, I'm never watching this ever again. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Alrighty, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for part 1. Make sure you check out the next video for part 2, where we do our top 5. Also, please make sure you hit that like button, the subscribe, thumbs up, share us with friends and family. You can find it here on the YouTube channel or here on our LRMonline.com website. Jammer, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at JamTheWriter, and of course, all of my writing at LRMonline.com. I'm pointing at my screen as if you know exactly what that is. But yeah, LRMonline.com.
And you can find me at @KyleMalone on Twitter, and you can find some writings I do on LRMonline.com, including the Cantina Star Wars column every Thursday. Thank you so much, and look for part 2. Have a good day.